Thanks very much for checking out this episode of Turning to Him. If you enjoy what you hear, feel free to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave comments, share it with your friends, all the basic stuff. When you do things like that, it makes it easier for other people to find the channel and add goodness into their lives. Thanks again. Hello, everybody. Thank you for turning into this episode of Turning to Him. My name is Zach Batty, and I am here with Jim Urban. Jim, as you can tell by his background, is a talented photographer. He's a cyclist and just an all-around amazing individual. Jim, thank you for taking the time to be with me tonight.
You're welcome. Yeah, this was, I was on a training cycling event and I snapped this picture with my iPhone down on Twin Lakes in Leadville, Colorado, which is at 10,000 feet. This is probably closer to about 11,000 feet up here where I'm taking a picture.
That's beautiful. I can't imagine being on a training ride at 11,000 feet. I mean, you got a set of lungs on you. That's fantastic.
Well, I've been a cyclist. I was a road cyclist for many years, and then I decided to try out some mountain biking, and it's been so much fun.
Okay. You know, I started to get into mountain bike to dip my toe in it. And I grew up in the mountains. I grew up skiing, and I realized very quickly when you crash on a mountain bike, it's a little bit different experience than when you crash on skis. And I'm a little bit older than I used to be, and so I started really slowing down a little bit, and that's kind of where I went. So I'm amazed that you're up there again at the elevations and taking pictures and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of like you. Like I don't let it all go like
Yeah.
some of the guys on the bikes. I like to think of that I'm always in control. If I'm in
Yes.
control, then I'm happy.
Fantastic. Where did you grow up?
So I did grow up right here in Denver, Colorado. I was actually born and raised here, and I'm still here. And I love being here close to the mountains. And as you can tell, I like being, that's what we're kind of known for here, right?
Yes, Mile High City, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How many kids in your family when you were a kid?
Oh, when I was growing up, I have and I still have two older sisters and two younger brothers, and we get along great. We had a wonderful family when I was growing up with them. Being the middle child, I always felt like I was kind of like in the middle. Everybody that is a middle child kind of knows what I went through a little bit, I think.
Okay.
My, my sisters got a little bit spoiled being the girls, and then there was me, and then my two younger brothers. When they came along, they got all the attention, so I was kind of like fending for myself.
Yes. Well, on behalf of all the youngest out there, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it was a rough road for you.
I feel like I'm a better person because of it. I feel like I'm more independent. I'm a harder worker, and I feel like it was all in God's plan.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good. So, what was life like growing up?
Life was good growing up for me. I had good parents. I was grew up in a good family with my dad in real estate and being successful and growing up in a nice home and going to good schools and in the Denver area. Um, we had a pretty good life. Like not everything was perfect, don't get me wrong. We had our challenges, but for the most part, growing up was a good experience and uh, had some learning experiences, but also some wonderful times with my siblings, going on trips and doing a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
We did do
Uh,
some skiing too, by the way. We did some skiing as well.
okay. I assume that Denver has changed quite a bit since when you were growing up to now.
Yeah, like so I grew up as a small child in the 60s and then in the 70s as a teenager. And we used to call it back then kind of a Denver cow town. We don't call that anymore. You know, the city's grown up so much and it's gotten so big, but it's still one of the places that I think it's parts of Denver and the mountains are some of the best places in the world to be, I think.
Yes, yes. Okay. Um, did you grow up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
I did not. I was not. I we went to the my parents were both different faiths. My dad was Catholic, and so we ended up going to Mass every Sunday. And then we kind of like we're kind of one of those families where we went to Mass for an hour, and before that hour, we were just kind of in the world, and then after that hour, we were kind of just in the world, you know. And we had just that 1 hour every week. We kind of were pretty persistent with it. So thankfully we had there was some effort put into going to church and trying to feel the spirit and those kind of things and back in those days. But it was probably not enough time because you know you want to make your life with Christ kind of a daily uh, a lifestyle, and that we didn't quite have that.
Okay. Okay. But it sounds like, I mean, you grew up, like I said, going to church pretty consistently every week. So God and Christ were a part of your life. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so my parents were both believers. My dad being so busy with his, you know, building his business, and my mom so busy raising the five kids that it was definitely a challenge for them. About an hour was about as good as we could do, it seemed like back in those days.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's a busy life. Okay, so you grow up, and at what point do you, I mean, are you naturally drawn to God and the Spirit and these types of things, or is it just, again, something once an hour that you do on Sunday and then you're off and running again?
I think I'm naturally drawn to it. I know that when I was a teenager and I started to want to, when I started becoming interested in girls, I was started looking for when I worked in retail back then at J.C. Penney's to name the store. I was kind of going through like kind of a dating period, and I was looking for girls that were, you know, wholesome and hopefully had faith. And I didn't even realize how much I really wanted my girlfriend to have faith.
Hmm.
And this is kind of how I found the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, by the way.
Okay.
So there's a story.
Yeah, I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
So the story is this. I'll keep it short, but it's really, really fun. So I was in the sporting goods at J.C. Penney's, which was kind of fitting for me. And I also kind of split my time to the cameras department back then because I love, as you could tell, photography and different things. So even back then, you know. And then um, there was this young lady in the toys department, and I was admiring her because she had just kind of came in the middle of the summer. And I'd already been there for a month or two, and then I noticed that she was different than all the other employees, and I'm going, wow, this girl seems different. And how she was different is that when the mother or the father would come in with and looking for a gift for one of their kids, um, back in those days, you know, the toys were in the boxes. They didn't really have a lot of displays. And so they would start asking about, well, what do you think about this toy? And Susan would this young lady named Susan would open up the boxes and take out the toys and start putting them together, which you're not supposed to do. But she was so just into like really helping the customer out beyond what you would normally do back in those days, that even the customer was amazed. And then they would invariably walk out with that toy, and they would, you know, they would buy it. And if they didn't buy it, then she'd put it all back in the box, you know, and
Yeah,
tape it all back in and all that.
that's great.
And then she was just so smiley and so friendly, and you could tell she had a special spirit about her. And and to kind of finish the story, one day she came into the sporting goods department and she said, "Hey Jim," she goes, "I'm trying to buy a gift for my brother. It's his birthday tomorrow." And so I helped her pick something out. And because I wanted to be just as servient as she was, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And so she put the item on the counter. I started ringing her up, and I told her what the amount was, and she was short like just a few bucks. And I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll contribute for you." So like she goes, "You'll do that for me?" You know? And so I wanted to really go beyond, like to really help her out. And then shortly after that happened, we became friends. And then shortly after that, I asked her out, and then a, a person that was in the cameras department had dated her and told me before she knew I knew that she was from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He told me she was a member of the LDS faith, and I said, "Wow, this is really intriguing to me. Like the only thing that I really know about the church is Donnie and Marie Osmond. That's like all I know."
Yes.
And
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
but I was excited about um her testimony. I was excited that she was committed to her faith. I could tell she was really committed to her faith just with her actions and with the way she spoke. A lot of the girls that I was dating before her used swear words, and they wanted to go out drinking, and they wanted to do things that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And this girl was not like that. And so like beyond like the norm, like way beyond the norm, I was really intrigued, and I said, "I've got to figure this out."
Okay. Now, how old were you at this time?
I was a, all 18 and she was like 17. She was just a year younger, so
Okay.
it was right in those years. Yeah, right before college.
Okay. So you start dating, and what happens?
So we started dating, and then after a couple of dates, she was in her, we were in the car, and she was talking to me, and she goes, "I have something I want to tell you." And I knew what she was going to tell me because I could tell it was coming. And I said, "Well, before you say anything, I think I already know what you're going to say." And she goes, "Like what?" And then I go, "Well, are you going to tell me about your church?" And she goes, "Yes." And so then I told her the story that I already knew. And she goes, "And you're still dating me?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And then I kind of told her why I was really intrigued with it. And then so we continued to date, and we had wonderful dates. And then one day we were at her house, and um, she asked me to if we'd go have dinner with the missionaries. And I agreed to do it, and we had a wonderful time with the mission. Of course, the missionaries were about the same age as we were,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, just kind of we were all the same age, you know. And then, of course, when I met the missionaries, they asked me if they could teach me the lessons, and I said yes, because one of the things that Susan said to me, because we were getting pretty serious at that point, she said, "I want you to know that I will never marry anybody unless I marry inside the temple."
And at that point, did you have any idea what that meant or what that was?
I only had well, I barely had any idea. And so that's another reason I wanted to meet with the missionaries, because I wanted to learn about like what's so special about this temple?
Yeah.
Why does why is she so emphatic about this? Like she was, and I said, "I better find out what it is because I'm kind of falling for this girl. I better find out what this is first."
Yeah, yeah.
And
All right, so the missionaries come over
yeah,
and you're meeting with the missionaries. I mean, at this point, is your curiosity with the church, does that ever grow into the whisperings of the spirit, or are you still just kind of enamored with Susan and curious about the church?
It definitely was. There was an infatuation, no doubt about it. Like flirt to convert was
Yeah.
100% there. No doubt about. I'm going to be honest with you, but I have to tell you that because of my upbringing and being a believer in God and wanting to know more about it, but not having enough teaching or training or whatever you want to call it when I was growing up, I was excited to meet with the missionaries to see what they had to say. I was a
Okay.
little nervous, but I was certainly excited as well. Uh,
Do your parents have an opinion about this at this stage? Do they know that you're meeting with the missionaries? Are they okay with that? How does that work?
So there is definitely some concern behind the scenes there with not so much with my parents. They knew that I was starting to meet with the missionaries. They knew that I was dating somebody from the Latter-day Saint Church, and they had a little bit of concern about it, but they weren't too bad. It was my older sisters, not my younger brothers, but my older sisters started doing some investigating, and they went to the anti
Uh-huh.
at that time. And boy, did they really come on to me with concern. And I can remember my older sister calling me and begging me to come out to Fort Collins, which is another part of outside of Denver. She was going to college there, and she asked me to meet with her because they wanted me to meet with their pastor of their
Mm-hmm.
church because
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to talk me out of becoming a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And like I was so young in my gospel knowledge. I was just being taught by the missionaries. And of course, was trying to tell me everything she could tell me and teach me. But I still lacked some confidence and I wanted to believe at that point, and I was growing, and I had a small testimony. I had a seed that was growing,
Yes. Yes.
and I didn't want to let anybody discourage me, but I wanted to speak to her pastor to honestly just hear what he had to say. I was curious about what he had to say, and I wanted to do it for my sisters to let them know that I had full exposure to what they considered the other side
Yes.
of the argument. And so I did that. And I was a little unimpressed with the pastor because I don't think he really knew that much. He knew some about it, but you know, um, they certainly, a lot of them take a negative side to a lot of things, of course. But I went away feeling like, okay, like that, I'm glad I did it,
Yeah.
rather than not do it, if you know what I mean.
Sure, sure. So at that point, how long had you been meeting with the missionaries?
Well, at that point, I'd been meeting with them pretty much through all the lessons at that point. I had already been through all the lessons. They were doing some follow-up visits with me.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the missionaries that I really liked was being transferred at that time. And so I was a little disappointed about that because I knew that if I decided to be baptized, that I'd want him to be the one
Yes.
to do it.
Okay.
So,
So does that all right, so you come back, the pastor, let's assume the best intentions, but the pastor's conversation did not dissuade you from
correct.
learning more about the church. You come back. Did the missionaries know that you were going to Fort Collins to meet with your sister and her pastor?
They did, and one of the missionaries, the other missionary, was also amazing because he said, "We have an idea for you because we know that it's going to take you a while to read the Book of Mormon." And we had the most interesting lesson that I could have ever imagined. He said, he goes, "This might take a couple hours." He goes, "I have a special lesson for you." And I go, "What are you doing? What kind of a lesson is it?" And he said, he goes, "I want to tell you everything I know about the Book of Mormon from the beginning to the end without reading it." And so he literally went through the entire Book of Mormon and told me every story that pretty much the whole every story that he could in 2 hours. All the stories in the Book of Mormon, all with the Nephites and the Lamanites and the families and everything that he could. And I was just so intrigued.
He gave you a
And
live action Cliff Notes of the Book of Mormon.
exactly.
Wow.
And I was just so impressed and I was blown away. I was almost, my mind was about ready to explode because there was so much information.
Yes.
But I kind of needed that. I kind of needed that because I didn't have time to listen to cassette tapes back then and get to the whole Book of Mormon.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's 27 hours if you read it
Yeah,
straight through. O-
right.
Okay, so you've been through all the discussions. You've been there, they're doing follow-up lessons with you. At some point, you decide to get baptized. Walk us through that.
Well, yeah, so I came back from college and because I had transitioned into college at that point,
Okay.
from high school to college. That very year that I was going through this, I was senior to University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, and I had come back and I was driving with Susan in the car, and we both decided at that point, or I decided myself, but I told her that I wanted to become a member. I had been attending some of the Institute of Religion even down there through the church.
Yes.
And I had grown closer to even deeper knowledge of the gospel and studying that when I was there before I was even a member.
Okay, so let me make sure I get the timeline right. So the summer of your senior or through your senior year, you're meeting with the missionaries,
Yes,
and then you graduate high school and go off to college. At college, you take institute classes, even though you're not baptized. So you're taking institute classes. Are you still meeting with the missionaries at college, or are you just taking institute?
just institute. Yeah.
Okay, and is Susan at college with you?
No, she's back in Denver.
Oh, because she's a year younger.
She's a year younger. Yeah, exactly. She
Okay, so
was
she go
she
ahead,
was
go ahead.
still she had one more year of high school to go.
Yes. Okay, so then she comes out to college, or you come home from college, and you guys are driving around in the car, and you tell her that you want to be baptized.
Yeah, and she was just so excited. She started crying, and I could really feel the spirit. I actually had prayed about it. By the way, when I was back at my parents' house, I was praying about it before this drive, and I felt like I was testified by the Holy Ghost that this is something I needed to do. And it was clear.
What made you feel like that was the time to pray about it instead of a year before when you were taking the lessons? Like why was that time the right time for you?
I think I had grown after studying with the missionaries and also going to institute and starting to get some of the information and I felt like I wanted to be involved because I knew that like things like the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price were true. I felt like the priesthood was true, and I wanted to have that in my life. And I thought if I was going to really marry this girl, I mean, I had to find out for myself if this was true.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it just because I loved her. I wanted to do it because I wanted to know if it was true or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's you pray about it, you feel confirmation of the spirit, you're ready to go, you tell Susan. She's
yeah.
happy. What happens?
So then we arrange the baptism.
Okay.
We get the missionaries, and
Oh,
then
wait, sorry. So are you meeting with the missionaries at this time, or do the missionaries just get a call out of the blue and they're like, "Hi, my,
out
my
of the
name's Jim.
blue,
I'd like to be baptized."
out of the blue. Now, what happened is the main missionary, Elder Pace, I remember his name. Um, he had transferred, And they don't do this very often in the mission. But I said, can you try to locate him and see where he's at? Now he was somewhere else still in Colorado, but he was far away.
Okay.
He could have been on the western slope somewhere for all I know. But they hauled him back to our part of town in Denver, and because I have I could have asked my father-in-law to baptize me, but I just felt really inspired to have this missionary baptize me. So
Yes.
they called him back, and we arranged the baptism, and he was there for me. So it was fantastic.
Wow. What a fantastic call for him to get.
I know. I know.
All right. So you get baptized. What happens next?
Well, of course, none of my family growing up showed up, which was disappointing, but it's okay. It was
Okay.
it, that part of it was disappointing, but I had some friends there. I had Susan and her family there, of course, and it was wonderful. And it was very memorable. But I knew that I had an uphill battle to go with my family, and because they were very concerned about me, but they didn't disown me. Like they didn't
Okay.
like say you're not a part of the family. They didn't do that. We They tried to accept the fact that this was important to me. But
Do you know, did they ever express or do you have an idea of what was the hardest thing for them to accept? Because it sounds like you've got a fantastic family that absolutely loves you and they have a legitimate concern about you joining this faith or perhaps cult that they don't know about.
yeah, that's exactly what they were concerned about. That it was a cult, and of course that we worship Joseph Smith and not Jesus Christ, which is totally against obviously
Right,
what we
right.
believe. And they had so many other concerns about the Book of Mormon. There were some members of my family that wouldn't even read it to find out for themselves. They just accept the fact that it was false without even reading it, which I couldn't
Yes.
understand. And my one of my younger brothers later, he and I had numerous conversations about the faith. He was the most willing to talk to me about it, and we had some heated conversations at times. But I would say in the last like 3 years, especially the last couple of years since I've been a high counselor, he's really kind of like, I'm not going to say he's accepted it, but he actually believes that I believe in not a different Jesus. You know how a lot of people say
Hmm.
you believe in a different Jesus.
Right, right.
He honestly, wholeheartedly now believes that we believe in Jesus Christ, and it's the same Jesus, even though the actual Godhead belief is still skewed, I should say.
Hmm. Hmm.
But he wants to believe that I believe in the same Jesus that he does.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. That's fantastic. Small steps, small wins.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right. So now take us back here. You're baptized, family struggling a little bit with support. You said you had an uphill battle there. But keep us going in the story.
Well, I would say that one of the things that my brothers and sisters would always say as we were raising four daughters, my wife and I have four daughters.
Oh, okay. No, no, wait. Is your wife Susan?
Yes.
Oh, I was so hoping. I was so hoping that's how the story would go, but I didn't know. So wait, so you get
I skipped
baptized.
that whole thing, didn't
Yeah, you
I?
skipped the whole thing. Okay, so you get baptized. How soon after you get baptized do you get married?
We get married as soon as we possibly can.
Yes.
So
Oh,
we
fantastic.
actually, so yeah, we can keep going with that story. You bet. I hate to miss that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it was so awesome. Like, so I was baptized in October of 1980, and we got married literally like a year after that.
Hmm.
And when we decided that we wanted to get married in the temple for sure. And back then there wasn't a Denver temple.
Okay.
So we, her side of the family and us, arranged the trip to go down to Mesa, Arizona, because that's where a lot of her family is from.
Yes.
And of course, there's the Mesa Temple, which is a beautiful temple down there with palm trees and oranges falling off the trees and everything. And it's just so wonderful. Such a beautiful experience being down there in Mesa, Arizona. And yeah, it was just so amazing to be down there. And of course, it was hard for my family because they always dreamed of seeing their brother being married. But
Right.
we had a nice ring ceremony when we got back to Denver,
Oh,
where
great.
the bishop got us, and they showed up for that. My entire family showed up for the ring ceremony with the bishop. We had a wonderful. My wife's bishop did the ring ceremony, and he had such a special spirit about him. And we even kissed at the end of the little ring ceremony and everything. So it made them feel like they had an opportunity to see us come together,
Yes.
in the fashion that they wanted to see us come together.
Yeah, yeah, a little more traditional setting, walk down the aisle, that type of thing.
Yeah. And
Oh,
so
fantastic.
it really was and they, I guess they were just starting to do that back in those days. That's, 42 years ago or whatever. And
Yes.
so they were just beginning to do that. And because, a lot of people were in similar situations that I was in. And yeah, so we did. She came down to Greeley with me, and we started our home down there. And I finished college with her as a married couple.
Okay. Okay. You go through what do you study in college?
Business administration, which I knew that I was going to go into real estate like my dad, so I stuck with the business end of things.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so you finish up college together, and then I mean, keep us going in the story.
we can.
Yeah, we fast forwarded to you said at one point you have four kids, and
Yes.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, yeah. So we started having kids and we kept having little girls.
Okay.
And they're all about 2.5 years apart. And our goal was to move back to Denver because we didn't want to stay down in the small town of Greeley, which was certainly a cow town back then, still
Yeah.
smells like a cow town. And so we come back to Denver and we're working together then. And I was working towards my real estate license and getting my career going. And uh, we were going to church every week, and the callings started coming, and our testimonies were growing, and we were just very, very active in the church and very involved and with different callings and things and raising little girls, just a
Yes.
wonderful experience.
Yes. Tell me through this, how does your testimony and relationship with the Savior change and grow or evolve?
Great question. Yeah, so, honestly, being called in elders quorum presidencies, and then also I would say the most impactful of my testimony growth whenever I was a teacher. Because when
Okay.
you're a teacher and you're teaching either elders quorum or Sunday school, and you're as busy as I am at work, it kind of forces me to study more. And I love to study, but I was also being an entrepreneur is kind of a nerve-wracking thing, and starting a business, and you want to be successful. You put so much time into that. But my heart wanted to study. And the best
Hmm.
way for me to study was if I had to study.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so those were the best growth experiences for Christ, reading the scriptures, studying for the lesson, and then teaching it. And I didn't want to teach the lesson unless I had a testimony myself, being able to testify and share, just like the missionaries do, or what, the same way with us as membership, as we're raising families and being in the church, just having that testimony and sharing it, not just on testimony meetings, but like I said, in teaching opportunities.
Yeah. Isn't that one of the greatest blessings of the church callings? I mean, if we were all celestial beings, then yes, we would study of our own accord and we would serve of our own accord and all of those things. But we're not. Sometimes we need a little extra help. And so being asked to prepare to teach a lesson or being asked to go help the so and so family with a move or being asked to do that, such a blessing. We need that.
We do, and I was thinking about that the other day. Of course, that's one of the unique things about our church is that we're called. We're not just. Um, my dad had a study leader in his office one time, and he called it. A lot of people go to church to sit and they soak and they sour. They sit and they soak and they sour. And as opposed to being when you have a calling, you're you're not just sitting and listening and souring, you're giving and you're serving. And like you said, even if you're helping somebody move, or if you're involved in Sunday uh, in teaching opportunities, or if you're assisting as a counselor, or whatever you might be doing, it gives you so much purpose.
Yeah.
And I love that about the church because we create service opportunities, and I think that's what a lot of churches just don't offer. I think it's wonderful that we offer that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were raising your family, did you and your wife ever have a conversation where you said, look, growing up, I went to church for 1 hour a week. That was my gospel interaction. I want more than that for my family. And walk me through that.
Well, first of all, um, when you're bringing, if you're bringing kids to church, obviously we had other things besides church, like family home evening during the week and that kind of stuff. But church in those days were 3 hours. So, we had the sacrament meeting, the Sunday school, and then the priesthood relief society. And then of course they had a primary for the kids for 2 hours after the sacrament meeting. And that's a pretty big commitment. A lot of people would say, man, your church is like 3 hours? Like that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think, boy, if only you knew. That's
Yeah,
just the
exactly.
beginning.
Well, and that's it. And if you have a leadership calling, you're there an hour before church, and sometimes you're there for an hour or two after church. You got meetings before and after, and you're doing home teaching interviews or ministering interviews, and you're doing all kinds of different meetings. And of course, they have bishopric meetings and stuff that I go to now, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. 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 It's good, but we need that. I mean, we need that to help keep us on the straight and narrow. We are wandering sheep sometimes, and we need
Yes,
that constant reminder to come home, come back.
yes.
We've been talking about callings, and you've had quite a variety. What calling do you feel like has impacted you? I won't say the most, but what calling has had a great impact on you?
I would say that before what I'm doing right now, I would say that the one that was probably the most impactful, and I was actually called to be the elders quorum president at a very, very young age. What happened, and I'll give you a quick story on that. Uh, I was back in those days, we went when we were, say, in our 30s or whatever, we were in the elders quorum. And then maybe when we were in our 40s or 50s, we were called into the high priest, right?
Hmm.
There was no age exactness, but that's kind of like where it was approximately. And so they had actually, we had a high priest group leader that was being called, and he was a pretty young one. He was probably around 45-ish or so. And he wanted some of the young whippersnappers in the elders quorum to assist him because he wanted to bring some energy to the high priest.
Yes.
And I had just I was like 31 maybe. I was a pretty young elder, and he called me to be in the high priest of all things with these guys that are in their 50s or late 40s and all the way up, right?
Yes.
And but I accepted. And then after it kind of was short-lived because that high priest got transferred only a year later. He got transferred out to
Okay.
another state. And then I thought to myself, okay, now do I go to the high priest? I guess I do. I'm pretty young just to kind of go as a regular member, but I am a high priest. But I didn't even have much time to think about that. And I got a call from, I guess it was the stake or whoever at that time. And they said, we want you to be the Elders Quorum president. And I said, how could that be? I'm now a high priest. Like I can't go back, you know?
Yes. Right.
He
Right.
said, oh yeah, you can go back. You can. And I was so happy to actually go back in the Elders Quorum because for the next about 6 years, I was so impacted by being the Elders Quorum president and serving those brothers that my testimony grew so much during that time. And we would go visit so many different people that were struggling, so many people that needed us, uh, that it was just one of the most greatest callings that I've ever had. Just because when you're in those kind of callings, it's there's nothing glorified about it, really. It's actually you're going to the people that are struggling the most, whether it's financially, emotionally, relationship, what marriage wise, or whatever it might be. You're kind of dealing with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. That's such a great reminder that leadership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints works so differently. Uh, when you are called to a leadership position, um, there is no earthly glory or benefit or anything like that. You are called to serve, and you're called to labor, and you're called to go to early morning meetings, and you're
Yeah.
called to do that. I don't want to say there's no glory or benefit because there is, but it's heavenly. It's not an earthly benefit or reward.
Yeah, and the satisfaction comes on a regular basis when you're serving, but then when you are called out of the position, you kind of reflect on the whole like 6 years, and when you're looking back, you're going, wow, like what a great experience. It's like probably
Yes.
like after you finish a 2-year mission, a full-time mission, you probably the same feelings. Like it was hard, it was challenging at times, and probably more challenging than there are some great times when you see successes happen. Of course, that overshadows all the hard stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when it's all over, and you're going into a new calling, you reflect on what you just finished, and you're going, "Wow, that was like I grew a lot from that. I was able to serve and help a lot of people, but my testimony, grew like tenfold, and
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about."
Wow, 6 years as an elders quorum president. That's a long time. That's a lot of moves.
Yes, yes, it
Wow.
is.
Oh, okay. Talk to me about your current calling. You mentioned that your current calling has really affected you.
Yeah, so my current calling is what we call high counselor. And so there's in our stake, there's um, 6 wards, and then there's the stake, which takes care, which oversees and administers to the wards. And the 3 members of the stake presidency, they don't have time to do it all. So they have their assistant is 12 high counselors. That's almost like the 12 disciples, like or apostles. It's so amazing. These brothers are so committed. And so we have, of course, more meetings. Uh, one of the things that we're assigned to do is go to two meetings a month with the stake presidency. And those meetings are like some of the most inspirational meetings ever. And it inspires us to go assist the bishoprics. And we're assigned to like certain wards, but then we actually speak in all the different wards every single month. We get rotated.
Hmm.
And so we're assigned to give these talks once a month. And that's for some people kind of daunting. Like speaking is one of the most nerve-wracking things that most people could think about doing. But to have it do it every month is probably even more overwhelming to some people. But I have to interject something here that's interesting because somebody in my ward many years ago inspired me to go to a Toastmasters meeting.
Okay.
And she inspired me to do it. And I actually was in the program for 13 years.
Wow.
Yes. And I did so much with Toastmasters. I gave over 120 speeches and I listened to probably about 3,000 speeches.
Yes.
And I feel that the Lord had prepared me for this calling because it was so important for me to. I mean, I don't think everybody has to go through that much to become a speaker, but for some reason the Lord wanted me to, I think. And but I just enjoyed it because I love being in Toastmasters was a one way for me to express my life, including my faith, to a lot of non-members.
Yes.
And those, like even my conversion story and my story about J.C. Penney's and all that stuff with Susan, it came out in a lot of my speeches. And but now, as a high counselor, speaking to members of the church on a regular basis, that I can't even describe to you, Zach, how the deepest commitment of discipleship that I've ever had in my entire life is right now. Because of being a high counselor, I literally feel like a disciple or one of the 12 apostles. I'm not sure if the other 11 do so much, but I bet they do. But I know I do. And like I pray so much to say the right things. I was just going over some of the assigned talks that I've given over the last almost 2 years, and before we got on this, and I'm just so touched by the inspiring words from the prophets and the general authorities, I should say, that actually speak in general conference and stuff, and to try to reflect their words and to reflect them back with through my testimony to the members has just helped me grow so much. My relationship with Jesus Christ is as strong as ever. And I've gotten so inspired by all of this that I've even written a book about it. And I actually share it with all of my top clients that I've helped over the years. I've decided that I'm not going to be shy anymore with talking about my life, like
Yeah.
what I do, because being in the gospel and being a disciple of Jesus Christ um, should not be something that we're shy to share about. It's so I'm just so happy and so inspired and just want to do so much good to help other people through this discipleship that I just want to share it.
I love it. What's the
Yeah.
title of the book?
So let me show you here. I've got a little copy of it. It's called From Survival to Sacred.
Okay.
And this painting right here that you see right here,
Yes.
my youngest daughter is a watercolor artist, and she's famous on Instagram, and Janelle Susan Art. And this is one of my favorite photos of Christ, and this made the cover. And
Yes.
the yeah, and the book basically goes into like my survival mode, at the beginning with which like I was frantically trying to, bring up this family with my income only
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur, and then how there's kind of like four laps of my life, and I kind of feel like I'm on either the late third or even to the into the fourth lap of my life. And this is the time where I really want to let my light shine with the help of Christ. And I talk about um, I'm I've gone from the survival mode to the 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 success mode to the significance mode, and now into the sacred mode. So that's what it means,
Mm.
from survival to sacred. So I feel like I'm in my sacred mode of my life. And I've written this book, I'm not shy about like my testimony of Christ, and some of the things that I'm doing through my calling right now with serving other um, communities through the Just Serve program and the communications program, which is also part of my calling now,
Yes.
and how wonderful it is to serve with other fellow Christians or may not be Christians
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
community for the good of certain, like whether it's building playgrounds or going down to Religious Freedom Day at the Capitol, and meeting with the governor of Colorado, and where he's signing the bill for
Hmm.
religious freedom and those kind of things. And I talk about a lot of this stuff in my book, and it's a pretty quick read, but it gets right to the point.
Yeah.
And I talk about it with people, I share it with people, and then of course I share the Book of Mormon as well. But this is a good icebreaker because it comes directly from me.
Sure. Okay. Tell me again those four phases. I liked that.
So here it is right here. So it's actually five. I think I might have missed one.
Okay.
The first one is survival. The second one is stability.
Okay.
So that's the second one is just gaining stability. The third one is success phase, and the fourth one is significance, and then the fifth one is sacred.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to think about that more. That's fantastic.
And I go into detail of each one of those five phases, but yet my life is it's it's the metaphor. I got it from my brother John, actually. There was a book called the Gun Lap book, and the Gun Lap book goes into, like you'd run on a mile, you would run four laps.
Hmm.
And when you hit that final lap, you got one lap to go, they'd shoot the gun.
Yes.
That's kind of where I'm at
That's the
right
gun
now.
lap.
That's
Okay.
the gun lap. And I pull that metaphor together with these five S's
Hmm.
and intertwine them together. And because I'm in that sacred mode right now as well
Yeah.
in life.
Hey, as we wrap up here,
Yes.
what advice would you give to someone who is listening to this and thinking to themselves, boy, this has been wonderful, but I am never going to be an elders quorum president. I'm never going to serve on the high council. So does that mean that I just don't get to have great spiritual experiences? Like Jim, am I just I don't get to have those in life? What advice would you give to that person?
That's such a great question. Obviously, I know that the Lord doesn't give special treatment to those that are in special callings or anything like that. You could be the greeter in our sacrament meetings, and have the Lord's not going to judge us, for what kind of calling. He knows what's in our heart. He knows our dedication to Christ, and he knows that. It's not about any particular type of calling. Like for me, those callings are important to me. Like they really changed my life. But you may never be in those kind of callings. You might just, you could be like if you're serving in the youth, that's actually probably more important than anything that I'm doing. I'm just serving adults, which
Sure.
is good too, don't get me wrong.
Right, 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 right.
But I see like my wife Susan, for example, she loves serving in the nursery, and that's her favorite thing to do in life is to serve the little children, just like Christ did.
Hmm.
And like she's she's had to teach me a lot of things. Like she's had to humble me so many times.
Sure.
And and that's why I think the Lord just allows her to keep serving the children because she doesn't need the work that I need.
Yes.
That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. I love that. I think that what I hear you saying is it's not about the calling, it's about the level of discipleship. And those two things aren't intertwined. You can have an extreme level of discipleship as a greeter, as the nursery worker, as the high councilman, as the elders quorum president. The calling doesn't matter. It's the level of commitment to the gospel and of worshiping the Savior.
Yeah, and I think that the Lord knows what we fit into,
Hmm.
and these people that call us to these positions, I truly believe they're led by the Spirit to help us uh, to be put in the right callings for us, and the Lord knows what. And sometimes we get a call and we're going, "How can I ever do this?"
Yes.
Like one quick example, because I know we're wrapping up, but I know that when I raising four daughters, I was called to be a cub master for boys.
Okay.
And when my four little girls were, doing their thing, and I thought, how am I going to serve these little boys when I've got all these little girls? And because I'm not raising boys, I don't even know that much about scouting.
Yes. Yes.
But I did that for a year, and there was the Lord knew that I needed to be in that position because I was once a little boy, and and I loved rain gutter regatta, and I loved Pinewood Derby, and after I at the end of that calling, some of the parents were so sad that I was getting a different calling. They said, "You've been the best cub master that we've ever had."
It's great.
And it makes you feel so good, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And so it's those kind of things that testifies to me that the Lord knows where we need to serve.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and all the things that you've learned. This has been a fantastic evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much for Zach for asking me to do this. It was so much fun to just to share.